Welcome, dear friend. It's time to settle in, to ease the day's weight from your shoulders like slipping out of a stiff coat. Perhaps you'll want to adjust your blanket just so, tugging it up to your chin like a shield against the chill that never quite leaves night's doorstep. Maybe a warm cup of tea in hand, the kind that steams softly and promises quiet comfort, or the gentle ritual of fluffing your pillow, coaxing it into that perfect cradle for your weary head. Take a deep breath now, in and out, letting the rhythm slow, as if your thoughts themselves are sinking into a pool of calm. Tonight, we're about to embark on a journey that feels a bit like stepping through a fogged window, where the world you know blurs into something both familiar and strange. Imagine, just for a moment, an old attic filled with dusty trunks and half-forgotten photographs, the kind where the edges curl like secrets waiting to be told. There will be shadows here, yes, but not the kind that threaten. More like the soft silhouettes of memories swaying gently in the dim light of a flickering candle. Picture a clock whose hands move with a peculiar rhythm, not quite the steady tick of modernity, but something more like the slow turning of a great wheel, creaking and whispering in the dark. Time here doesn't rush, like the endless notifications buzzing on your phone, nor does it crawl like a slow-loading web page on a spotty connection. Instead, it flows with a curious patience, like waiting for a letter in an era before instant messages, when anticipation itself was a flavor you savored, bittersweet on the tongue. As your eyelids grow heavier, imagine a tapestry woven from threads of mist and sighs, hinting at places where the air tastes different, thick with the scent of herbs and old wood, carrying whispers that might be the wind, or perhaps something just beyond the edge of hearing. It's a place where the bustle of city traffic, honking and honking, is replaced by the soft shuffle of footsteps on cobblestones, where the clatter of keyboards gives way to the rustle of parchment and the scratch of quills. There's a peculiar charm in this quiet strangeness, a kind of lullaby that hums beneath the surface of history's more tangled tales. Think of it as slipping into a dream where the usual rules bend, where the mundane slips aside to reveal the curious machinery of days long past. Like waiting in line at the post office, where the minutes stretch and yawn, but the stories whispered in the queue are richer than any headline scrolling endlessly on your screen. Tonight, you'll find yourself drifting toward a world where the ordinary becomes extraordinary, not with the flash of neon lights or the hum of electric appliances, but with the subtle glow of lanterns swaying in the dark, casting playful shadows that dance just out of reach. It's a slow-moving story like a train winding through misty hills, its whistle a lonely song carried on the night air. Feel the gentle pull of this unfolding tale, like the soft tug of a favorite blanket wrapping you closer, coaxing your thoughts away from the clutter of the day. Let your breathing slow to match the steady pulse of this other time, where the chatter of social media is replaced by the murmur of voices in a dimly lit room. A room where secrets are exchanged over the clink of glasses and the weight of unspoken stories hangs thick as the smoke from a dying fire. As you sink deeper into this calm, imagine the moment just before sleep fully claims you. The delicate pause when the world blurs and shifts, like the fading colors of a sunset melting into twilight. The familiar sounds of your home soften, replaced by the rustling of leaves in a night breeze, carrying with it the faint scent of something ancient and alive. You're on the cusp of waking somewhere else, not in your bed surrounded by the hum of modern life, but in a place where the air is dense with anticipation and the unknown. Here, the past breathes softly alongside you, its heartbeat slow and steady, inviting you to listen closely to the stories it carries. And as your eyes close, heavy and willing, know that the journey is just beginning. Soon, you will open them not to the ceiling of your room, but to a world painted in shadows and whispers, where every breath carries the scent of herbs and smoke, and where your role will be something far stranger and far more fascinating than anything you've yet imagined. So, rest now and prepare to step across the threshold. The night awaits, and with it, a story unlike any other. You awaken with a start, or perhaps more accurately, a gentle jolt, your body pressed against a rough wooden pallet strewn with coarse, scratchy cloth that does little to soften the hard planks beneath you. The air is thick and stubborn, heavy with a mixture of damp straw, smoke curling from a low-burning fire, and something less easy to name. An undercurrent of sweat mingled with the sharp tang of vinegar, and something faintly metallic that sticks to your nose. Your breath catches for a moment as a faint, distant groan filters through the thin walls, a reminder that sickness is never far in this place. Blinking against the dim light filtering through a small, shuttered window, you realize you are not in the cozy, temperature-controlled sanctuary of your modern bedroom. No, here the dawn creeps in unevenly, painting the stone walls with patchy golden shadow. A faded tapestry hangs askew, its threads worn and smelling faintly of mold and dust. Nearby, a wooden chest sits half open, spilling out wrinkled linen garments and a worn leather satchel. On the floor, a cracked clay pot leaks a slow trickle of dark liquid, perhaps yesterday's water, now stale and uninviting. Your fingers brush against the rough fabric of a coarse wool tunic, discarded nearby, its texture prickly and unyielding against your skin. The chill in the room seeps into your bones, a cold that no modern heating system has banished. You shiver, remembering the soft, synthetic fibers of your clothes back home and the comforting embrace of a heated mattress pad. Here, warmth is earned through layered clothing and proximity to the sputtering hearth, where the scent of burning herbs mingles with the acrid stench of smouldering wood. As your ears adjust, the soundscape unfolds, the faint clang of a blacksmith's hammer striking iron somewhere down the cobbled street, the clatter of wooden carts rumbling past uneven stones, and the distant, plaintive tolling of a bell, perhaps calling the townsfolk to prayer or signaling the start of another workday. A dog barks sharply, followed by the hurried footsteps of someone moving with purpose. From somewhere close, the low moan of the ill drifts through the thin walls, a haunting lullaby to this place where health is fragile. You lean forward, tasting the cool, stale air, and your nose crinkles at the mix of odors, smoky embers, the faint sourness of spoiled meat hanging in a nearby basket, and the unmistakable scent of herbs steeping in a cracked earthenware bowl. The fragrance is both soothing and unsettling, a reminder that healing here is as much a matter of ritual as of medicine. Your tongue flicks against dry lips, and when you drink from a chipped wooden cup, the water is murky and flat, nothing like the filtered streams or bottled springs you once took for granted. Your skin prickles under the weight of rough leather straps and the scratch of unwashed linen. The clothes scattered around are a far cry from the soft cotton and flexible blends of your usual attire. Their stiffness and smell tell stories of long wear and hard labor, and as you tentatively pull on a tunic, the fabric chafes your skin, making you wonder how anyone could find comfort in such garments. At least the leather belt cinches tight enough to give a faint sense of security, though it digs into your waist with an unforgiving grip. You catch your reflection in a dull metal basin, a tired, unfamiliar face framed by tangled hair and shadowed eyes. The mask resting on a nearby table draws your attention, its long, curved beak staring back at you like a bizarre relic from a nightmare or a carnival. Picking it up, you feel the rigid shell of leather and the faint scent of dried herbs tucked inside its hollow nose. Your modern mind recoils slightly. Your idea of a bad morning used to be forgetting your phone charger. Here, it's realizing your mask smells worse than the very patients you're meant to help. A reminder that comfort is a rare luxury. With a reluctant sigh, you strap the mask to your face, the leather biting into your cheeks and the tiny glass lenses fogging slightly with your breath. The world narrows to a dim, filtered view, as if you're peering through a veil woven from the past itself. You rise unsteadily, the rough floorboards creaking beneath your feet, and step outside into the chill morning air. The street greets you with a chorus of life. Market stalls manned by groaning merchants, hawking pungent cheeses and bundles of wilted herbs, children darting between passers-by with laughing shouts, and a priest in threadbare robes intoning prayers beneath a weathered stone archway. Faces turn as you pass, some curious, others wary. The mask marks you as something apart, a figure both respected and feared, like a guardian against invisible threats or a harbinger of darker times. A woman leans out of a narrow doorway, her eyes wide and voice low, as she whispers about the latest illness sweeping through the village. Nearby, a soldier sharpens his blade with methodical strokes, glancing nervously at the crowd. The air is thick with tension and hope, woven together like the threads in the tapestry back in your room. As you navigate the uneven cobblestones, the weight of your role settles over you, not just the physical burden of the mask and garments, but the invisible mantle of responsibility. The village itself feels like a living organism, pulsing with fear, resilience, and the quiet determination to endure. This world is a far cry from the sleek efficiency of your modern life, where problems are solved with a swipe or a click, and discomfort is often just an inconvenient glitch. Here, every breath is a negotiation, every step a cautious promise. The scent of smoke and herbs clings to your senses, the sounds of life and sickness mingle in an uneasy harmony, and the chill in the air reminds you that comfort is earned, not given. It's a strange, compelling place to wake up in, a world where history's shadows stretch long and the past whispers secrets you are only beginning to understand. And as you take it all in, the cracked stone walls, the wary eyes of villagers, the distant tolling bells, it becomes clear this is not your time at all. To truly understand where you've just woken up, we need to step back and see the world that shaped this life. You have awakened in the midst of the 14th century, during the relentless sweep of the Black Death, a pandemic so vast and terrifying that it reshaped not only populations, but the very fabric of society. This was an era ruled by kings and emperors whose power was as much about divine right as it was about swords and alliances, where the church held sway over hearts and laws, and the common folk navigated a world more precarious than any buffering on a slow internet connection. Society was a patchwork quilt of vastly unequal pieces. At the top, the nobility lived in stone castles and manor houses, their days filled with politics, feasts, and the occasional hunt, an existence buffered by wealth and privilege, like a VIP lounge shielding them from the chaos outside. Below them, the clergy wielded a different kind of power, their influence stretching from the pulpit into the daily lives of peasants and nobles alike. Priests and monks were the interpreters of divine will, their authority unquestioned, their prayers a supposed shield against the unseen horrors stalking the land. Then came the merchants and artisans, the backbone of the bustling towns, hawking their wares in markets noisier than Black Friday sales, though perhaps with more livestock than shoppers. Finally, the vast majority lived as peasants, farmers, labourers, and serfs bound to the land, their lives dictated by seasons, toil, and the whims of those above them. For them, survival was often less about skill and more about luck, like trying to get a signal in a dead zone. The physical world around you is a patchwork of contrasts. Cities rise with towering stone walls, narrow winding streets, and open squares where traders shout over the cacophony of bartering voices, clinking coins, and the occasional braying mule. Villages cluster near fertile fields, their mud brick homes huddled together, smoke curling from thatched roofs. The roads connecting these places are more mud than stone, turning into treacherous quagmires with every rainfall, making travel a slow, messy affair. Imagine your daily commute multiplied by every pothole and detour, but without the consolation of a heated seat or a podcast. Markets burst with life and odour, a mix of fresh produce, livestock, and less pleasant scents that modern sanitation has mercifully banished. Churches dominate the skyline, their spires piercing the sky like fingers beseeching heaven, while inside the air is thick with incense and whispered prayers. Life's pace is dictated by the sun and the sacred bells. You rise not to the jarring buzz of an alarm app, but to the crowing of roosters and the tolling of church bells, signals that mark the start of labour, prayer, or rest. The day is a series of repetitive tasks, tilling fields, tending animals, weaving cloth, or crafting tools, each as physically demanding as any modern workout, but without the shiny gym equipment or protein shakes. Baths are rare luxuries, often viewed with suspicion. Taking one might have been akin to announcing to your neighbours that you were plotting something untoward. Cleanliness was a complex affair, entangled with superstition and practicality more than hygiene as we know it. Your Wi-Fi frustrations pale in comparison to the challenge of lighting damp wood in the rain or finding a dry bed in a cramped, smoky room. Power structures are rigid but fragile. Monarchs and local lords wield authority through armies, taxes, and the backing of the church, while the majority live in a delicate balance between obedience and survival. Wars and invasions churn the landscape, and epidemics like the plague are as much a political force as a medical crisis. The Church's role is paramount, offering both hope and control, its teachings interwoven with superstition and fear. People turn to saints, relics, and prayers, but also to strange remedies and charms, blending faith with folk wisdom in a way that can seem both quaint and desperate. Speaking of remedies, some of the beliefs of the time would certainly raise an eyebrow today. For instance, people believed that carrying a handful of onions in your pocket could ward off the plague. Talk about organic medicine before it was trendy. Others swore by sniffing flowers soaked in vinegar, a medieval take on masks and antiseptics, hoping the sharp scents would keep sickness at bay. And then there were the infamous plague doctors, whose beaked masks stuffed with aromatic herbs were as much about intimidation and ritual as any real medical efficacy. Imagine a time when your protective gear looked less like modern PPE and more like a costume from a Gothic masquerade. This was a world where superstition and science danced a complicated waltz, where the unseen forces of disease and fate were as real and terrifying as any invading army. Yet, amid the hardship, there was resilience, festivals marking saints' days, communal meals, and the stubborn hope that the sun would rise on better days. Life was unpredictable, messy, and often brutal, but it was lived with a spirit that modern convenience can scarcely imagine. Now that you know where you've landed, let's zoom in on your daily life, how you eat, sleep, try to keep clean in a world that has very different ideas about comfort and hygiene. The air is cool, carrying the faint scent of smoke from last night's hearth fire, mingled with the earthy musk of damp wood and worn cloth. You stretch, feeling the stiffness in your joints, no surprise after sleeping on a thin straw mattress atop rough wooden planks. Your tunic, made from coarse wool that feels like hugging a hedgehog, clings to your skin, and you already sense the day's grime waiting to settle in. Rising from your humble pallet, you shuffle toward the corner where a large wooden basin sits, filled from the night before with water drawn from the village well. You dip your hands into the chilly liquid, the cold biting your skin in a way that makes you flinch. No heated showers here, just the fresh, bracing bite of nature itself. With a rough linen cloth, you rub your face, the fabric scratchy against your cheeks, nowhere near the softness of any modern towel you've ever known. There's no soap, no fragrant lather to chase away the night's residue, just water and the scrubbing motion, a simple attempt to feel awake and present. Forget your 10-step skincare routine. Here, survival is splashing some cold water on your face and hoping the neighbors don't think you smell worse than usual. Bathing is a rarity, often reserved for special occasions or when illness is suspected. Many believe that water opens the pores and invites disease in, so instead, households rely on herbal sachets and pungent perfumes to purify their living spaces and their bodies. You might find bundles of dried lavender, rosemary, or sage hanging near the hearth, their fragrances weaving through the smoke and soot. Sometimes a splash of vinegar diluted in water is dabbed on the skin, thought to ward off contagion, an ancient, if somewhat sour, form of antiseptic. The whole ritual feels both practical and superstitious, like a whispered promise to keep unseen dangers at bay. Your small living space is modest and intimate. The walls, darkened by years of smoke and soot, seem almost to breathe with the stories of those who have lived here before. A low wooden table, scarred and stained, holds a few clay pots and a battered iron skillet. The floor is strewn with rushes, dried reeds meant to soften the cold, hard planks beneath your feet. Nearby, a small pile of firewood crackles softly in the hearth, its warm glow casting dancing shadows that flicker across rough-hewn beams overhead. The scent of burning wood mingles with the faint, lingering aroma of yesterday's stew, a comforting reminder that life, despite its hardships, goes on. Your clothes are simple but heavy, a woolen tunic, thick hose, and leather shoes, stiff and unyielding, their soles worn thin by countless steps. The fabric irritates your skin, causing an occasional itch that you suppress, knowing scratching might only worsen the discomfort or draw unwelcome attention. Your idea of uncomfortable clothing might be a scratchy sweater from a modern store, but here it's wool that feels like a constant, prickly hug from a hedgehog that never lets go. Yet these garments are your shield against the cold and the elements, a necessary burden carried daily. When hunger nudges you, you sit down to your morning meal, a humble affair of hard, coarse bread, some aged cheese with a sharp tang, and a thin, watery broth simmered from whatever vegetables and scraps were available. The flavors are muted, the textures tough, nothing like the rich, aromatic coffees or fluffy pastries you might dream of in another life. Eating here is a practical necessity rather than a pleasure, a quick refueling before the day's labors begin. Hygiene extends beyond the physical in this world. You clutch a small charm, perhaps a carved piece of bone or a worn amulet, believed to ward off evil spirits and sickness. Before stepping outside, you mutter a short prayer or incantation, hoping to shield yourself from the invisible threats that lurk in the air. If you were a plague doctor, this ritual would be far more elaborate. You'd don the infamous beaked mask, stuffing it with aromatic herbs like rosemary, mint, and cloves, designed to filter the miasma thought to carry disease. Your heavy leather cloak and gloves would complete the ensemble, making you look like a creature from a dark fable rather than a healer. As you dress, you'd feel the weight of the costume, both physical and symbolic, a barrier between you and the relentless tide of illness. Despite the strangeness of these customs, you find a quiet acceptance settling over you, like slipping into a familiar, if slightly uncomfortable, old coat. The world you inhabit may be harsh and unrefined, but it is yours to navigate, one breath and one step at a time. There's a rhythm here, a flow to the mornings that grounds you even as the uncertainties of the day stretch ahead. Now that you've survived the morning rituals, it's time to step outside and see how the rest of the world expects you to play your role. Your leather boots sink slightly into the muck, the cold seeping through the soles, reminding you that comfort is a luxury rarely afforded here. The weight of your tools and garments presses against your body. The heavy waxed leather cloak that repels some of the dampness, the iconic beaked mask filled with pungent herbs, cloves, rosemary, and mint, meant to shield you from the invisible miasma that everyone fears and yet cannot see. Your satchel, bulging with bundles of dried herbs, small vials of vinegar, and a wooden cane, swings at your side as you navigate the twisting alleys. As the village stirs to life, you become acutely aware of your role within this fragile community. You are the plague doctor, a figure both needed and feared. To some, you are a healer, a beacon of hope amid the relentless shadow of death. To others, a grim reminder of the pestilence that stalks the streets. Children peer at you from behind their mothers' skirts, their wide eyes flicking between fascination and terror, whispering tales of your strange attire and the sickly scent that clings to you like a second skin. Merchants pause briefly in their haggling, casting wary glances as if your presence might taint their wares. Nobles in their distant manners regard you with polite detachment, yet their servants avoid your gaze. You carry the heavy burden of expectation to comfort, to cure, or at the very least, to seem useful in a world unraveling. Your path takes you first to the bustling market square, a cacophony of shouts, clanging metal, and the mingled aromas of smoked meats, fresh bread, and unwashed bodies. Farmers unload their carts heavy with root vegetables, their faces etched with exhaustion and worry. Soldiers in dull, dented armor march past, the clatter of their boots a steady drumbeat against the cobblestones. Amid this lively chaos, your presence is a stark contrast, a silent, ominous figure moving deliberately through the crowd, the beak of your mask casting long shadows in the pale light. You offer a curt nod to a monk crossing the square, who clutches a rosary and mutters prayers under his breath, his eyes flickering with both reverence and fear. Your duties are as exhausting as they are grim. You visit cramped, dark cottages where the air is thick with the stench of sickness and despair. Inside, you examine the ailing, pale faces mottled with fever, eyes glazed with pain. Your wooden cane, more than a symbol, serves as a tool for probing and keeping distance from the afflicted. Some patients recoil, their fear of contagion mingling with the terror of their symptoms. You prescribe poultices made from herbs, instruct caregivers on burning contaminated linens, and perform crude assessments in the absence of true cures. The sick room's heavy air is punctuated by coughing fits and whispered prayers, the walls seeming to close in with each breath. The smell of sulfur and vinegar lingers, an attempt to combat the invisible enemy. It is a far cry from any modern clinic, Forget your emails piling up in an inbox. Here, the backlog is a line of coughing patients waiting outside your door, each one a plea for salvation, or, at the very least, dignity. The social dynamics you navigate are complex. Nobles may grant you grudging respect, recognizing your role as essential, yet they keep their distance, preferring to shield themselves behind walls and guards. Servants and peasants treat you with a mixture of suspicion and hope, some daring to ask questions about remedies, others retreating at your approach. A merchant calls out a warning about the market's latest outbreak, and you exchange terse words with a soldier stationed nearby, discussing the grim reports from neighboring villages. Children, emboldened by curiosity, sometimes reach out to touch your glove, only to pull back quickly, startled by the cold leather. Monks offer blessings, their voices low and steady, while some townsfolk whisper that your mask hides not only your face but the very face of death itself. You carry with you relics of your trade, steeped in almost unbelievable lore. For instance, many plague doctors believe that the cane is not solely a walking aid, but a necessary instrument to poke and prod patients from a safe distance, avoiding contamination. Some even smoke small bundles of tobacco inside their beak masks, convinced that the pungent smoke wards off disease like a medieval form of aromatherapy. These rituals, strange to modern sensibilities, are part of a desperate arsenal against an unseen enemy. They blend science, superstition, and hope in equal measure. The very sight of your attire can send a shiver through the town, a reminder of death's shadow lurking just beyond the veil of everyday life. Around you, the village pulses with life despite the ever-present threat. Market stalls burst with produce, the clatter of coins mingling with laughter and argument. Nearby, a religious procession winds its way through the streets, incense smoke curling upward, the chants of monks filling the air with a somber cadence. Soldiers drill in the courtyard, their commands sharp, the clang of swords and shields echoing off stone walls. You move through this tapestry, a living thread woven into the fabric of community survival, your presence both a comfort and a warning. Despite the gravity of your role, moments of humor and humanity emerge. You might catch yourself comparing your morning rounds to a modern-day traffic jam, only instead of honking horns, it's the coughs and groans of the afflicted, each one demanding your attention. Office politics today may be trying, but at least they don't involve wielding a cane in one hand and a bundle of herbs in the other. It's an odd sort of dance you perform, balancing the weight of expectation, fear, and the faint glimmer of hope that your efforts might make a difference. As the sun climbs, burning away the mist and casting sharp light on the village's worn faces, you prepare to move on, ready to face more homes, more stories of suffering and resilience. But behind every busy market stall and every wary glance, there's a deeper fear that shapes this world, a current of belief and superstition that colors every interaction. To understand why people look at you that way, we need to step into their beliefs and superstitions, exploring the spiritual shadows that haunt this time and place. It's in the way people avert their eyes when you pass, whispering hurried prayers under their breath, as if your very presence might summon the unseen dread stalking their homes. The air is heavy with the scent of burning wax and damp stone, the echo of solemn church bells tolling for the dead, ringing through streets that have grown eerily silent. You can almost taste the tension, bitter and metallic, mingling with the ever-present dust and smoke. The fear here isn't just about the plague. It's hunger gnawing at bellies, the distant rumble of war, and the dread of divine punishment for sins both known and unknown. In this world, faith is woven into every moment like the thread binding a fraying tapestry. Before a single step is taken, hands cross the chest in the sign of the cross, voices murmur prayers to saints for protection and mercy. You see the glow of countless candles flickering in the cold stone churches, their flames battling the darkness outside. The smell of incense curls through the air, resinous, sweet, and smoky, a fragrant attempt to cleanse the soul and the world beyond. You hear monks chanting in low, rhythmic tones, their voices rising and falling like the breath of the earth itself, filling crowded sanctuaries where the faithful seek refuge from terror. It's a daily ritual, a lifeline. Today one might scroll endlessly through streaming videos to escape worries, but here people clutch their rosaries as if they were life jackets in a storm, each bead a fragile hope against the tumult. Superstitions flourish amid the uncertainty, forming a patchwork of rituals intended to keep the invisible enemy at bay. You carry with you a beaked mask, stuffed with aromatic herbs, a primitive shield against the miasma. The poisoned air believed to carry death like a thief in the night. Villagers hang bundles of lavender, rosemary, and sage in doorways. Some smear vinegar around thresholds or sprinkle salt to ward off evil spirits. Amulets fashioned from bones, stones, or twisted metal hang from necks and belts, each one a talisman in the battle against disease. Songs and chants rise from gatherings meant to chase away restless spirits, and odd mixtures, sometimes including animal blood or crushed roots, are applied in hopes of healing. It's the medieval version of essential oils, except with a slightly higher chance of accidental poisoning, and perhaps just as much faith invested in their power. Fear acts as both glue and wedge here. It binds the community together in shared dread, but also drives wedges of suspicion and blame. The plague is blamed on witches, heretics, and those deemed morally corrupt, leading to violent accusations, hurried lynchings, and the desperate flight of families seeking safety beyond the village borders. The spectre of famine lurks behind every empty granary, and rumors of divine wrath swirl like a storm threatening to break. The streets pulse with nervous energy, every cough is a herald of doom, every shadow a potential threat. You see men and women glance at each other with suspicion, their trust frayed by the omnipresent terror. It's a world where vigilance is survival, and even kindness can be mistaken for weakness or complicity. Your role as plague doctor places you squarely at the heart of this maelstrom of fear and faith. To some, you are a savior, the only shield between life and the abyss. To others, you are a harbinger of death, your beaked mask and dark cloak a symbol of the fatal pestilence itself. You catch the furtive glances, the quick crossing of oneself as you approach, the whispered prayers that follow in your wake. Children, half terrified and half fascinated, mimic your mask in games, while adults debate in hushed tones whether your remedies offer hope or hasten demise. Trust is a fragile thing, and you tread carefully between hope and despair, healing and horror. Strange beliefs cling to this time like cobwebs. Some villagers insist that carrying a dead toad in your pocket wards off the plague, a charm against the invisible killer. Others believe that whipping oneself in the streets, flesh raw and bleeding, is the only way to earn God's mercy and stave off divine wrath. There are tales of priests blessing relics soaked in holy water, then using them to anoint the sick, while midwives chant incantations learned from forgotten tongues to protect newborns from evil eyes. These customs, bizarre to modern ears, are lifelines for a people drowning in uncertainty. They are the whispered prayers, the flickering candles, the trembling hands grasping for control in a world slipping into chaos. Emotionally, fear here is like the smoke from 100 chimneys, a persistent haze you breathe in whether you want to or not. It settles into your bones, cold and inescapable, yet somehow familiar, a constant companion on your daily rounds. The dread sharpens your senses. The faintest cough, the slightest pallor, the nervous twitch of a villager's hand. Yet beneath this omnipresent fear, there is a strange kind of calm, a lullaby of survival sung softly amidst the chaos. Night falls and the village quiets. The fears retreat momentarily into shadows, leaving you with the echo of prayers and the steady heartbeat of a community holding on. But even in a world heavy with fear, people still reached for one another, finding moments of connection amid the turmoil. And beyond the prayers and charms, there were bonds that kept life moving, fragile, human, and surprisingly familiar. It's not just for food or shelter, though those are scarce enough. No, it's for something more elusive, something that no plague, no famine, and no war can fully extinguish: the comfort of another heartbeat nearby. In a world where death lurks in every whisper and shadow, the warmth of human connection becomes a fragile sanctuary. Around you, families crowd under one roof, a small hearth enfolding generations. Children cling to the skirts of grandmothers weathered by decades of loss, while uncles and cousins share the cramped space, sometimes barely tolerating each other, yet bound by necessity. Forget Netflix family drama. Here, your cousin might literally sleep on the floor just a few feet away from you every single night, their breathing a steady reminder that you are not alone. These households are both refuge and prison, a network of obligations and loyalties as tangled as the roots of an ancient oak. You see the sharp glances when a family member crosses a line, the silent endurance of grudges held close, and yet the unspoken promise that no one is left to fend for themselves entirely. Outside the walls of homes, the threads of friendship weave a delicate web. Neighbors share what little they have: a crust of bread, a jug of watered wine, a whispered word of advice. In the market square, you catch fleeting smiles exchanged over the bustle, moments of solidarity in a world where trust is often as scarce as clean water. Yet even these bonds are fragile, stretched thin by suspicion and fear. Friendships can unravel overnight when illness strikes, or when a whispered rumor brands someone as unclean or cursed. Still, you witness acts of kindness. A hand steadied for the elderly, a child's laughter shared among companions, a quiet promise to watch over a neighbor's home during a long absence. Love, too, finds its place amidst the turmoil, though often shadowed by uncertainty. Romance here is a secret glance across a smoky tavern, a whispered promise exchanged beneath flickering torchlight. Tinder swipes would be unimaginable. Love is less about convenience and more about courage. Perhaps a dance is offered if the fiddler's strings hold steady, a stolen moment of joy in a world that offers so few. You hear tales of betrothals arranged to secure alliances or protect dowries, and of forbidden liaisons hidden behind heavy curtains and locked doors. Love is both refuge and risk, a gamble with fate as uncertain as the turning seasons. Social hierarchies carve deep grooves in the fabric of these relationships. You see the stark divide between peasants and nobles, between clergy and layfolk, each group bound by unyielding rules and expectations. As a plague doctor, your place is ambiguous. You are respected by some as a bearer of hope, feared by others as a shadow of death. Your presence commands attention, yet trust is a currency exchanged cautiously. You navigate these layers carefully, aware that a misplaced word or gesture can shift allegiances or deepen divides. Community rituals offer moments of shared purpose and respite. You find yourself swept into processions lined with singing voices and waving banners, the scent of freshly baked bread mingling with the sharp tang of sweat and smoke. Weddings burst with color and noise where the clang of pewter mugs and the drone of bagpipes fill the air. Funerals bring a chill, cold hands grasping yours in farewell, tears mingling with the bitter wind. Festivals brighten the bleak calendar, moments when the village breathes together, if only briefly. You feel the rough texture of woolen cloaks, the warmth of clasped hands, the sharp sweetness of spiced cider. Yet beneath the revelry lies tension. Rivalries fester, disputes over land flare, and hushed accusations of witchcraft ripple through the crowd like poison. Social life is a tangled dance of affection and suspicion, where gossip spreads faster than the plague itself. Your awkward office party? Try a medieval wedding feast where half the guests are drunk by midday, and the other half are embroiled in shouting matches over goats or inheritance. At least your neighbors don't accuse you of witchcraft when your lantern flickers out. History offers its own share of curious social customs. In some villages, sneezing during a wedding was considered a good omen, unless you asked a certain grandmother who swore it spelled doom. Public punishments were another spectacle altogether, blending justice with morbid entertainment, the medieval version of reality TV, complete with jeers, tears, and the occasional bribe to soften a sentence. These moments, strange and solemn, reveal a community grappling with fear and hope in equal measure. Emotionally, these bonds form the backbone of survival. They are the hand that steadies you when the world tilts, the voice that whispers courage when all else fails. In the face of relentless hardship, human connection is the spark that keeps the flame of life flickering. And of course, nothing brought people together or drove them apart, quite like food and drink. If you really want to understand these bonds, you need to sit at their table. The dim light of a tallow candle flickers, casting dancing shadows over trenchers made from thick, coarse bread, sturdy enough to serve as plates, if not exactly inviting. The scent wafts upward, a thin broth simmering over the hearth, mingled with the sharp tang of pickled onions and the faint, smoky hint of salted fish resting nearby. This is no feast, but it awakens your appetite all the same. Your fingers brush against the cold, rough edges of the wooden spoon, hand-carved and smoothed by countless meals. There are no forks here, those are luxuries of distant courts. Instead, you grasp a small, blunt knife, its blade worn but serviceable, used both to slice the dense rye bread and to pry morsels from bone. Nearby, a chipped clay bowl cradles a portion of pottage, a thick stew of barley, root vegetables, and herbs picked from the village garden. A stained rag serves as a makeshift napkin, and a shallow basin of water waits for the inevitable washing of hands, the ritual beginning and ending each meal. You can taste the divide of the world in the food laid before you. For many, this humble fare is sustenance enough, the gruel's earthiness, the rough bread that scrapes at your gums, the occasional sharp bite of aged cheese, or a hard-boiled egg. Fish, salted or smoked, appears on designated holy days when meat is forbidden by church decree. The local ale is weak, pale as watered-down honey, but safer than the muddy well water that leaves a gritty film on your tongue. For the wealthier, tables grown under roasted game, spiced with pepper that travelled hundreds of miles, drizzled with honey, and accompanied by dried fruits that taste like distant promises. Wine flows in heavy goblets, rich and dark, a stark contrast to your clay cup's thin, sour-smelling brew. Before the first bite, hands are washed solemnly, the cool water a brief relief from the day's grime. A whispered prayer escapes trembling lips, a plea for health and protection, or perhaps a quiet thanks for this small blessing. The order of eating is strict, elders and nobles first, the common folk waiting until the high table has been served. Portions are measured carefully, waste is a sin in itself. and hunger sharpens the senses to every crumb. You glimpse a child eyeing the meat scraps under the table, her fingers twitching with longing, the pang of hunger sharper than the bitter ale. The table is a stage where status plays out as plainly as the food on your trencher. At the market, the air is thick with the cries of vendors hawking their wares, the pungent tang of herbs crushed under boot heels, the yeasty warmth of bread fresh from the communal ovens, the clatter of barrels rolling along uneven cobblestones. You weave through the crowd, your cloak heavy and your mask a barrier between you and the world's invisible threats. You gather your supplies, vinegar, sharp and biting, bundles of rosemary and sage, their aromas momentarily overpowering the staleness of the streets, a rare orange, its scent a fleeting reminder of sunlit coasts far beyond the village. The healer's bag is a patchwork of hope and desperation, just like the food that sustains the people. At the table, etiquette breathes quietly through the motions, a nod to the lord of the manor as he carves the roast, a respectful silence during the blessing, the careful passing of the jug without speaking out of turn. You observe the dance of manners, the unspoken rules that separate the noble from the serf, the clergy from the tradesman. Excess is frowned upon in public, yet in private chambers, banquets overflow with delicacies, their abundance a sharp contrast to the rationed meals of the many. Still, waste is rare, leftovers are reheated, bones are boiled for broth, and stale bread finds new life as trenchers or soaked in vinegar. Hunger is a constant companion, sharpening senses and tempering desires. It is a hunger not just for food, but for comfort, for a moment's peace in a world unraveled. The rough bread against your tongue is a reminder of the day's toil. The sour ale is a bitter balm for weary spirits. You think of the modern world's endless choices, the convenience of a meal delivered hot to your door. A luxury here, as distant as the stars. The village's table is humble, but it is where life lingers, where stories are shared, and where human bonds are quietly forged over shared spoons and whispered prayers. With the last crumb consumed and the wooden bowl emptied, the village exhales softly. The hunger in stomachs may be sated for now, but the soul seeks more. After the meal, the city stirs toward music, laughter, and the small rebellions of night. Dances under torchlight, songs that chase away shadows, and the brave steps of those who dare to defy the darkness for a little light. You rise from the rough-hewn table, the last crumbs of bread clinging stubbornly to your trencher, and step out into the cooling evening air. The sun leans low, stretching shadows long and thin along the narrow streets. Lanterns, simple iron frames holding flickering tallow candles, cast a trembling glow on muddy cobblestones, while the scent of warm, yeasty beer mingles with the faint aroma of damp sawdust spilled near the blacksmith's forge. Laughter bubbles from doorways, cautious and muffled, as if the night itself holds its breath between joy and dread. Drawn by the familiar clamour, you find yourself at the village tavern, a crooked building sagging under the weight of years and whispered stories. Inside, the air is thick with smoke and the sweet, sour bite of spilled ale. Dust motes waltz in the shafts of lantern light, settling on the uneven boards worn smooth by countless boots. The hearth crackles, sending tongues of flame leaping to chase away the chill. The benches wobble precariously, threatening collapse under the weight of eager patrons, while a battered wooden counter, darkened by oils and spills, bears the scars of 1,000 hurried paws. Around you, games unfold with the familiar rhythm of chance and hope. Dice clatter against the table, tumbling like promises of fortune, though more often they fall as disappointments, like a bill arriving just when your purse feels lightest. Nearby, a game of 9 men's Morris draws a small crowd, the players' fingers tracing worn lines on the board, plotting moves with quiet intensity. Voices rise and fall, stories and gossip weaving through the air like smoke, punctuated by the cheerful clink of tin mugs raised in fleeting celebration. From a shadowed corner, a voice struggles through a cantiga, its tune rough but warm, carrying the stubborn joy of a village refusing to be swallowed by despair. Music spills into the street as well, lutes strumming soft, tentative chords, the plaintive cry of a fiddle weaving through the night, flutes calling like birds in the dark, and steady drum beats marking a simple, steady pulse. Feet shuffle and stomp in a circle, boots stirring dust and sweat, mingling with the scent of wood smoke and herbs. You watch, or sometimes join, feeling the warmth of bodies pressed close and the sweet exhaustion of movement. The dance is simple, but it carries the weight of survival, a small rebellion against the creeping shadows. Not far off, a makeshift stage hosts a troupe performing a mystery play. Their costumes are rough, patched tunics, hastily stitched veils, and their voices rise and fall with the familiar tales of saints and sinners. Laughter and reverent silence mingle as the villagers see their own fears and hopes mirrored in the coarse fabric of the drama. The flicker of candlelight illuminates painted faces, the smell of beeswax mingling with the faint tang of herbs tucked into belts. The calendar's turning is marked by festivals, fierce bonfires for St. John's Eve, where sparks rise like fleeting dreams, solemn processions winding through darkened streets, candles held high, their flames flickering against stone walls heavy with centuries of prayer. The air carries the scent of burning rosemary and sage, mingling with the distant toll of church bells. These moments stitch the village's fractured days into a fragile tapestry of faith and tradition. Yet beneath the laughter and song lurks unease. The flagellants tread the streets, their bare backs glistening with fresh wounds, voices chanting penitence that cuts through the night like cold wind. Their presence is a reminder of the thin line between salvation and despair, drawing wary glances and whispered prayers. Sermons delivered beneath flickering torchlight warn of divine wrath, folding fear into the fabric of celebration. Curious onlookers gather around the square watching acts of penance or the rare execution, the spectacle a grim punctuation to the evening's revelry. As the village healer, your arrival in these gatherings is met with a mix of respect and guarded fear. The mask you wear beneath the flickering lights marks you as both savior and spectre. A nod here, a whispered question there, someone seeks advice on a fever, another pleads silently for protection against the unseen. You touch the eaves of a nearby roof, a small ritual to ward off ill fortune, feeling the rough wood beneath your gloved fingers, steadying yourself amidst the swirling uncertainty. The night breathes with contradictions. Laughter rings out, bright and defiant, even as distant bells toll a mournful reminder. The dance challenges the darkness, yet shadows cling stubbornly to alleyways. The warmth of bodies pressed close contrasts with the chill of mortality lingering just beyond the firelight. Here, in this fragile world between fear and joy, the village finds its pulse. When the last note fades into silence, the distant bell answers, reminding all that every celebration carries the quiet weight of what must come. Between songs and shadows, the city remembers its oldest truth. All things begin and end, like the fleeting spark of a candle against the night. You find yourself beside a woman whose breath comes in shallow waves, hands clenched around rough linen, as the first light of dawn filters through the narrow window. The midwife offers a basin of warm water, scented faintly with herbs, her voice low and steady as she murmurs prayers between the rising and falling of the newborn's tiny chest. The baby's cry breaks the fragile silence, a small, clear bell ringing out hope amidst the shadowed walls. Hastily, the child is wrapped in coarse cloth, the urgency of baptism pressing on the room like a whispered fear. In this fragile moment, joy is measured and quiet, a delicate thread woven through the ever-present uncertainty of survival. Not long after, hands are joined beneath the heavy wooden door of the stone church, a knot tied not only between two souls, but between families and futures. The bride wears a simple veil, stitched by the careful fingers of kin, while the groom's grip is firm yet tentative. Ribbons are fastened, bread and salt shared, a promise of sustenance and protection in a world that offers neither lightly. The village gathers as witness, their voices a brief chorus that rises and falls like the seasons themselves, steady and unyielding. Music spills softly from a lute, a fleeting celebration of connection in a time when alliances mean survival. Years pass in the rhythm of labor and learning. Tools are passed from calloused hands to eager fingers, each scar and groove on wood and metal a story of endurance. Grandparents offer quiet counsel, their words carrying the weight of seasons survived and lessons etched in memory. A worn bench in the corner, its surface polished by generations, holds the imprint of countless moments, laughter, tears, whispered hopes. Through this lineage, the craft and care of the village persist, a thread of continuity binding past to future. But life's tapestry is incomplete without the shadow of parting. In a humble chamber, a sick soul lies beneath a thin blanket, the scent of herbs mingling with the faintest trace of earth. You stand close, offering the unction, a touch both sacred and small, while prayers drift softly, a fragile shield against the encroaching dark. When plague sweeps through, ritual becomes hurried, rites abbreviated, and silence grows heavy in spaces once filled with song. Your presence is a quiet testament to care amid helplessness, a bridge between life clinging tight and the inevitable release. Outside, the church bell tolls a slow, solemn rhythm. A procession moves through the misted streets, candles flickering like fragile stars against stone. The earth receives its burden with a muted sigh. Hands press the soil, soft and damp, over simple graves, sometimes shared in haste, names whispered into the cold night air, kept alive in memory and prayer. Nearby, frescoes and stained glass hold the dance of death, a reminder etched in color and shadow, humility in the face of fate's impartial hand. Yet, in this cycle, there is profound beauty. Each birth, each union, each farewell is a thread in the village's endless fabric, woven with care, hope, and the stubborn light of human spirit. Every loaf broken, every cup raised, every laugh shared in a narrow alley is a quiet miracle. You close the window against the chill night, listening to the village breathe, steady, resilient, enduring. Returning to your chamber, you settle beneath a linen sheet worn soft by time. The candle burns low, its flame a gentle heartbeat in the dimness. Outside, the world holds its breath between moments, and you, too, find peace in the slow ebb of your own breath. The journey here is complete, for now. The candle fades, but warmth remains. Close your eyes, the village lives on, and so do you.